and it was this beautiful, like shocking pink color because the cobalamins a deep crimson red. When you mix it with a lighter moisturizer base, it was pink. And one of the first patients I gave it to, she called it her pink magic. And I was like, oh, that's the perfect name. And it's really good. It's very modest for most patients. It's obviously not going to replace a topical JAK inhibitor. Don't worry. You're not going to have to get rid of that. But boy, is it nice, especially for babies. I find it very useful as more of a maintenance treatment, so they can maybe still use their corticosteroid or their JAK inhibitor or their non-steroidal prescription medicine, and then when they're better, they can switch to the pink magic to help prevent flare-ups. And super well tolerated. You can even make it in your home. I gave the recipe. It's quite simple. We have it made in small batches. I want to say it's around $20 or $25 for a tub to get it pre-made, so it's very not terribly expensive. Yeah, just a little more than a moisturizer because there's some work. They have to mix it and so on.
Welcome back to the Above and Beyond Dermatology podcast, where we help you go above and beyond the conventional wisdom of taking care of patients and taking care of business. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Lewellis. I'm a Stanford and NYU trained board-certified dermatologist with a passion for integrative dermatology and business development. I'm also a recovering cog in the wheel of big healthcare, and I'm the owner of Above and Beyond Dermatology. I'm also the medical director of Skinovations Medical Aesthetics. I'm building this thing in real time, and my goal is to help anyone out there who might either just have an itch or be well on their way to doing something similar. I want to try to bring you some value along the way as I'm learning and applying it. If you're a regular listener to the show or have ever listened to any episodes prior to episode 40, you likely know this show as the Direct Care Derm. I'm moving on from that title as the show has certainly evolved over time, but as I discussed in a previous episode, it'll be Above and Beyond Dermatology from here on out. That title much better encompasses what I'm trying to do here. It also aligns with my brand and everything I'm trying to do in terms of building my own practice, as well as helping other people who are wanting to do something similar. I'll gradually phase out this introduction as the new title becomes more familiar, but I did want to address it to avoid any confusion. Please note that there are a few upcoming episodes where I still do introduce the show as the former title, The Direct Care Derm, while I'm actually with my guest. Apologies for any confusion in that regard. Eventually, everything will be aligned, and the show will be referred to as Above and Beyond Dermatology in all areas. Again, thanks for being here and enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of the Above and Beyond Dermatology podcast. I'm your host, board-certified dermatologist, Dr. Stephen Lewellis, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by Dr. Peter Leo. Dr. Leo is actually one of my white whales for this show. I don't know if he knows that, but he certainly is, and I'm really excited to bring him to you today. Dr. Leo is a board-certified dermatologist and an absolute leader in integrative dermatology, and something that we are going to be talking a lot about today. Dr. Leo received his medical degree from Harvard Medical School, completed his internship in pediatrics at Boston Children's Hospital, and his dermatology training at Harvard, where he served as chief resident in dermatology. He's the founding director of the Chicago Integrative Eczema Center and has spoken nationally and internationally about atopic dermatitis as well as alternative medicine. He has dedicated his career to bridging conventional dermatology with complementary and integrative approaches, helping patients achieve healthier skin through a holistic lens. Beyond his clinical work, Dr. Leo is a key figure in dermatology education. He's deeply involved with LearnSkin and serves as faculty for the Integrative Dermatology Certificate Program, of which I'm a recent proud graduate. In this program, he helps train practitioners in evidence-based integrative approaches to skin health. Today, we're going to explore Peter's journey, the evolving landscapes of integrative dermatology, which is a huge area for dermatologists to explore, especially who want to help people in a way that's above and beyond what's the typical norm these days, and for incorporating practical strategies for this type of care into your everyday practice. And if you happen to be a patient, you're going to learn some tips as well, no doubt. So without further ado, Dr. I'm really excited and proud to have you here, so welcome.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And I want to start off, actually, I'm going to start off with saying that Dr. Julie says hello.
Oh,
she's the best. She's the best, yes. I was joking with her just about 5 minutes ago, and I said, I'm interviewing you. And she said, oh, she was excited. She said, tell him I said hi. And I told her we might just talk about you the whole show and then throw people a curveball. So we could do that if we want. If folks don't know, Dr. Mina Giulipali, was on episodes 22 and 44 of the show. Amazing pediatric dermatologist, owner of Bluebird Pediatric Dermatology, and a friend of both Peter and myself. And did Mina do the program, or she's been in this stuff forever? I know, but I know you're good friends.
Yes, she's not actually come through the program formally, but she's been at Integrative Derm Symposium. Yes. She hangs out with me a lot at the National Eczema Association Expo. Okay. Like, she's involved in a lot of these ways and has taught for IDS as well.
She was ahead of the curve for sure, and has had much more training than a lot of us, even those of us who have gone through the program. So anyway, with that out of the way, I want to allow folks to hear a little bit about your story. A lot of us have a story that sounds something like I graduated and I ended up in a practice that looked a lot like a lot of practices do these days, and at some point I felt like there was something that was missing, or some way I wasn't able to care for people the way that I truly wanted to. And that might not be part of your story, and that's okay. Does that resonate with you, or where was the switch in your journey into the type of dermatology that you practice now?
It definitely resonates. My switch maybe happened earlier than some. I've been interested in sort of the fringe of science and the fringe of medicine for as long as I can remember. When I was a little kid, I was obsessed with UFOs, the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, other cryptids. Like, this is my kind of thing. So when I got to medical school, I was instantly fascinated by those weird, fringy questions. Like, what is the word on acupuncture? Why didn't we talk about this? What about Qigong and energy healing things? And what about the power of prayer? People ask about this, but then it wasn't covered as part of the curriculum. So I was fascinated by it, and I got lucky to be with some really great folks, and we started an alternative medicine interest group at a time when it was becoming more popular. So we got to meet with some different luminaries in the field, and that was really fun. One of the big ones was Ted Kapchuk. He wrote a fabulous book called The Web That Has No Weaver. I highly recommend it. It's a bit outsider, but also a bit insider. He's a practitioner as well, but he started from a Western standpoint of looking at traditional Chinese medicine and herbs and talking about that. That was fascinating. Another luminary who has faded now, it's funny, but in its heyday, a guy named David Eisenberg was one of the first people to really bring alternative medicine. He was on the cover of all the magazines. He was on 60 Minutes. He was the first U.S. medical student to actually spend time in China learning traditional Chinese medicine. And anyway, so I got to be part of this and kept kind of fostering that interest and cultivating it. And then when I did residency, became the Fox Mulder of the residency. Anything weird, they were like, ask Peter, he might have some weird idea on it. And some things I knew, but most things I didn't. And then when I graduated, I took my acupuncture course. I became a licensed medical acupuncturist. I took a 9-month course led by Kiko Matsumoto and David Euler. That was fabulous. It was actually part of Beth Israel Hospital at that point, and that was incredible. That was eye-opening, and then just continued on. And so eventually met wonderful people like Raja Sivamani and Apple Bodemer and Vanita, and we put this thing together, and we were giving these lectures and talking about it and wanting to learn more, and that's spun into creating a journal, the Journal of Integrative Dermatology, which is super cool, to having a full course, to having the Integrative Derm Symposium, to getting to talk about it a lot and meet like-minded people all over the world. So it's been this journey and really exciting, and I feel like my patients benefit from it every day. I learn new stuff. It really feels like almost every day I can bring something in and say, hey, can we try this? Can we talk about this? Let's look into this. And then that part has even spun off even more, where now startup companies are saying, we have a concept. Can we do this? So it's just so cool. I get to be in all these different positions to think about these problems and try to foster new innovation in these areas.
Beautiful. I am going to work backwards a little bit. First of all, thanks for sharing that. I think the story is what people really need to hear and connect with. And I know so many people have a version of the stories that a lot of the folks that I've interviewed and myself have. And yours, I love how early it started. That is something I haven't heard a lot of. So you were truly ahead of the curve, and I love that you embraced that. You just liked the fringe, like you said, and eventually, if there's something to the fringe, eventually it's no longer the fringe. And that is, I feel like, the era we are fortunate enough to live in. There's a lot to complain about in the medical system right now, but for someone who's willing to think outside the box, that also means there's a lot of opportunity. That's how I like to think about it. So I'm motivated rather than sad about some of the obstacles right now. And you mentioned, first of all, shout out to, you mentioned Raja Sivamani, Abel Bodemer, then Dr. Levtov, so many different people, Vinita Sivamani, all at LearnSkin and also doing other things. But what you have built there is incredible, as an incredible resource for both physicians, but also other allied health practitioners have courses that they can take there as well. And the Integrative Dermatology Symposium is where I feel like people who are feeling a certain way show up and they say, I found my tribe. And that, yes. What do you say? What do you think about that? Has that ever crossed your mind about IDS?
100%. It's by far my favorite conference of the year because it is exactly as you say, a conference that doesn't just include some of this, but it's based around it, and it's truly integrative in all the different ways we think about it. It's integrative in that it's not just dermatologists there, right?
Yes,
there's nutritionists and gastroenterologists and rheumatologists and naturopaths. It's so cool to connect to people because we all, to some degree, have to take care of the skin, and the skin is part of a complex organism. So it's so weird sometimes to only talk about the skin. And I think in general, even dermatology conferences, we talk about medical connections, we talk about these other systems, but how cool is it to really go across?
Yes, this past year was my first year there, and I felt exactly as I described. I was also there for the Integrative Dermatology Certificate Program Intensives, which is a program prior to which we really a lot of hands-on stuff. We had a Reiki experience and seminar with Dr. Steve Dave Louis, another incredible person associated with LearnSkin and IDS, and it was just phenomenal, and I agree about it being. It's also my favorite now, even though I've only been once. So thank you all for all the work you put in.
The best part of it is the people that come and experience it. So thank you. We put it together, but if nobody came, it wouldn't be what it is. So it's all the people and all the connections. That's the magic.
No problem, and I apologize for that ring going off in the background. That's live TV, I guess we're doing here. I don't have enough of my stuff silenced, so I apologize to the listeners for that. But yes, I agree with that. It's all about the people. I actually, two of the folks I met at IDS, and I thought you were going to say it, and I hoped you were, and you did. You said it's not just integrative in terms of the things how we're trying to help people. It's integrative in the people that we are learning from. And that spirit of collaboration rather than competition or these sort of divisiveness that sometimes happens between physicians and advanced practice practitioners, that sort of thing can really drag us down, but we can learn so much more from each other. I had the pleasure to interview Lachelle Yulee, who's an esthetician, an incredible guy who I saw a presentation from at IDS, and then I said, I got to have you on the show, and we have that one about men's skincare, and I like that as a niche. It's something that's not talked about as much. And then Dr. Dejara Sims, who is a naturopath, and she has a great interest in dermatology and a wonderful business helping people, especially people with acne. So already just from that meeting, I get exposure to not the dermatologists that I already have so much exposure to, but people outside of that where my learning is a lot higher leverage because there's so much more. My learning my baseline is much lower with respect to what they can teach me.
Me too, 100%.
Cool. Love that you're open to that. Going back to what you shared at the beginning, again, working backwards a little bit, can you talk a little bit about your experience? You said that the acupuncture program, you seemed really enamored by it and how it still plays a role, if it does, in your current practice.
Thank you. Yes, it really shaped my thinking more than anything. I think the philosophical ramifications were tremendous because I looked at this coming fresh from residency where we were steeped in conventional evidence-based mechanistic medicine and saw a totally unique perspective, a totally new explanatory model, a totally new system that really was internally consistent and in my experience was pretty darn effective. I watched Kiko Matsumoto, who's a master. She has a whole school of acupuncture named after her. I watched her fix patients and help people in ways that I felt like, whoa, this is not something we could even touch. But I also, which is really important to me, I watched her turn some patients away and say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you. I want you to do more of a conventional course. And that, to me, That is the highest level. When I want to get a sense of how good a clinician somebody is, I realize it's the person who knows him or herself, right? Because that's the magic. If you know your limits and you have a sense of your failures, then I know you're real. Anybody who walks in saying, I can fix everything, we cure everything, you guys are a bunch of charlatans, we know how to fix it. I'm like, really? Have you really tried? Have you really seen these more severe cases that are desperate, that have tried many things? So medicine's humbling, right? We see people at their absolute worst, people who are itchy and uncomfortable and in pain and haven't slept and really feel downtrodden because they've been told, this will help, try this thing, try this miracle cure, try this diet, it's just gluten and dairy, it's all in the gut, it's not in the gut. So it's confusing. So our job is really to help guide them. And part of that means being sober and being honest and being humble at all times, because if you stop learning, either you figured it all out and you're like the artificial intelligence who's now escaped the planet and knows everything, in which case, congratulations, I have some questions for you. But more than likely, you've just closed yourself off and you believe you've hit the peak. And I think that's dangerous. It's dangerous for anybody, but particularly for clinicians.
I love that. The answer to your question is 42, by the way, for all of you Hitchhiker's Guide fans out there. And just the idea of that transformation. It's not always this is how I learned acupuncture and now I do it to this set of patients. And it's the mindset shifts that happen within those experiences that are often the most long lasting and the most applicable to other things, the other ways you approach your life.
Exactly. The way of thinking about health and disease, the way of talking about it with patients. But yes, I still do use some concepts from acupuncture, although I am not a great acupuncturist. I'm not even a decent acupuncturist. So I refer out when I want someone really to get it. I have a couple of close colleagues around Chicago and in other parts of the country where I'll say, listen, I would like you to see this person. They really are expert clinicians in this domain. And I'm not. I'm like a medical student level, and maybe just enough to get into trouble.
Yeah. You're a young Padawan still in terms of that. I want to spend some time on that, actually, because it intertwines with what you said about the acupuncturist who you learn from and is master, but still turns certain patients away. And that is the highest level in terms of how well you know yourself, and also a way to engender or build trust with your patients. That's how in my practice, I presume at least, and I think this is borne out, that my patients, one of the ways they come to trust me is when I refer them to someone else, even not just refer them to a gastroenterologist, something I clearly can't do if they need a colonoscopy or whatever, but something I could potentially do, but I know somebody who's better at it. And so I could do it and it would not be malpractice and I would get paid for it, but I know someone down the street who's going to do a better job. And no kickbacks from that other than earning your patient's trust. And everyone that I send them to who does a great job for them, I tell myself that's reflected back on me in their head. And it is just such an abundance way of thinking about things and allowing ourselves to do your best in our skill set and constantly be expanding our skill set as well, but then know the other people around and have those relationships where you know they're going to get good care for that elsewhere. Maybe you can speak to, I know there's acupuncture, for instance, it's daunting, right? Of course, if you're not trained, you're not going to be sticking needles in people. But even if you are, you mentioned it takes a long time, a lot of reps to get to a place where you're confident doing it. But acupressure, do you mind talking about that a little bit and how you might apply that to if you had a patient with severe atopic dermatitis, for instance, in clinic?
For sure. So one of the fascinating things is that at least the style of acupuncture I learned, and there are different styles and different approaches. There are some more cookbook ones where you look up the pattern and do the thing, and that's fine. Our style, this Kiko style, is more of a dynamic style. So you are finding areas in the body, in particular using the abdomen, the hara in Japanese, where they're pressing areas in this concept of reflex points. So they press on an area and the patient says, ooh, that's uncomfortable. Then they find a release point and they stimulate it either with acupressure. First, usually you're just pressing down or a needle. And then you press that same point again on the belly. And then they say, oh, it feels better. And it's this fascinating system of reflexive points in the body. So that's neat. And that's why what I'm about to say, my teachers would not like, because this is a little bit more cookbook. But it turns out there is a very interesting point called large intestine 11, and it's located on the arm near the antecubital fossa, near the crease of the elbow. And it's a fascinating point because it is used in a lot of different sort of prescriptions for acupuncture that have to do with itch and inflammation in the body. and it's been used a lot. So there was a fabulous study a number of years ago, actually in renal failure patients. So the patients that have kidney disease, that they're terribly itchy because presumably they're not able to get rid of some of the metabolic waste products, and they are miserable patients. Not a lot of things work. But they did this where they did acupuncture to that point, and they actually compared it to a group that got a fake acupuncture point. So they did all the same stuff, quiet room, told them they're going to do the acupuncture, but it was a fake point. And it was dramatic and very statistically significant difference. So I saw this paper and I thought, maybe we can't do needles easily, but could we use the same point, large intestine 11? Could we do acupressure? And we did a small pilot study and it really worked. So I love to recommend this to my patients. I show them, I say, this is a spot. It's right here on your arm where the brachioradialis connects. You can do a gentle massage anytime you're itchy, and maybe at least three times a week if you can, for at least 2 to 3 minutes. And it really does seem to have an effect. Now, since I've learned about a concept called habit reversal therapy, which is a way to give people a replacement behavior instead of scratching or rubbing. And it turns out I did 2 things with this. This study was not a very clean study because not only was it an acupressure study that we did to confirm this, but it also was a habit reversal therapy study. So it was a little bit of both, which is fine because at the end of the day, I just want people to get better. But if we really were serious, we might have had a sham point, and that would have been helpful. But the truth is we saw this already proven to be better than a sham acupuncture point with the acupuncture study. So highly recommended, easy to do, cost nothing, essentially no risk to do it. I guess you could bruise yourself if you play too hard, but that's about it. And it's really been one of those things, especially for teenagers. I think they love it. I show them this, tell them this is your itch point. Whenever you're feeling itchy, you rub this, and it just has a really nice effect that helps. Is it going to replace dupilumab or cyclosporin or something? No, of course not. It's not a replacement for anything, but could it potentially be another piece of the puzzle that might mean somebody doesn't have to escalate to a higher therapy? Yes, all those little pieces add up. It's like in Gulliver's Travels, right? The Lilliputans used tiny ropes, but hundreds and hundreds, so that even giant Gulliver couldn't move. So I think we know this is true.
Okay, I just got another analogy to use for my patients now. So I'm constantly learning from you. This idea of the pieces of the puzzle, Gulliver's Travels, the little bits where you take from this is integrative. That is what it is to me. We have a circle, a pie, if you will, and most of us, if we're conventionally trained in the U.S., are taking from a fairly restrictive part of that pie to help our patients, primarily within conventional pharmacologic, both prescription and over-the-counter, and procedures that are fairly conventional as well. And the integrative to me is teaching yourself and constantly learning about that entire pie and not excluding one in favor of the other just because I'm kind of the people on Instagram who are shouting about carnivore or vegan or whatever, just one thing is good for them, so it's good for you. That loses my trust when someone is saying that, because we know bioindividuality, everyone's a little different, but the cumulative effect of small things and the way that can minimize the amount or dose or length someone might need a conventional medication. And that is really empowering to me, and a good way to frame it when I'm talking to patients they ask me about red light therapy or photobiomodulation, not just red, all the time. And I say, very promising. I would never prescribe this as the only thing for your given thing, but if you add it with this and a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that, all of a sudden you don't need nearly as much prescription meds as you did before. And that truly is integrative to me. So thank you for another teaching point. Communication is really important. How we talk to people, the Gulliver's Travel. Any thoughts on that? Especially, I imagine you see a fair amount of kids at the Chicago Integrative Eczema Center. I know Dr. Jill Polly is incredible at communicating with children. You and I are certainly novices, probably compared to her, but any tips for us in that regard? Jumping around a little bit here, but
no, it's great. It's so true, because kids, it's its own complex situation. Talking to the kids, talking to the parents, it's a much different dynamic than just talking to an adult patient. I think for me, a lot of it is connecting with the pediatric patient individually too. And sometimes you'll see people who don't see a lot of kids. They just ignore the kid. They'll just talk to the parents the whole time, which is where the money is. That's what you have to do, right, to some degree. But it's so nice to spend a couple of moments just to play or question, what are you working on? What's that? What's your t-shirt? What's that? Those little tiny pieces, I think, make it so that when it's time to come back, sometimes I say, I want to see him again. I had a good time, right? Because especially if we're not doing a shot or anything, thankfully, then to them it's boring. But if you can involve them a little bit or talk to them a little bit, I think that's nice. And of course, we know that many families with young kids, they're very nervous. They're even more nervous than a patient, right? So an adult patient who has psoriasis maybe wants whatever works. I'm ready for anything, doc. Just hit me with your best shot. But when you're talking about a 2-year-old, it's like the family's like, is it safe? Is it been studied in these kids? Do we know what the long term is? It going to affect anything? And it's a lot of the truth is we don't have a lot of answers for many things. A few years ago, we had 0 FDA-approved systemic medicines for atopic dermatitis in anybody, right? Except for prednisone, which is grandfathered in, literally 0. And now we at least have a few. But if you look under age 12, we've just got one biologic. There's not that many options. It's very easy to run through the list, and patients still have a lot of questions. And of course, when you really dig into that data, there's not been that many people. It's not that long. The drug launched essentially 8 years ago. So we really have a lot to learn. And so I think we have to be guides. I'm telling the families, this is not a paternalistic style. I don't know the necessarily best thing for you. We're going to try stuff together. We're going on a journey. You have to be comfortable. If you're not comfortable, you're not going to do it. So there's no need for me to be obnoxious about it and say, do it or the highway. That's not going to help anybody. So they have to be excited. And sometimes it takes some time to come around. So I'll present options sometimes early on and say, will you let me know when you're ready to go to the next step? But also thinking out of the box, because the box is for little kids really small. So there's not too many things that we can consider. So we need to think out of that box and try stuff. Do a lot of them not work as well as I wished? Yeah. There's just tremendous unmet need, and lots of my patients are still suffering. But do we really make a difference for some? I'd like to think so, right? People come back and sometimes they really are saying, wow, this really made a difference, and you've been able to help me in a way that I wasn't able to do before. So that's the magic. That's what we're doing, and that's what makes it worth it.
Nice. There are a few things in there. As a person who owns a practice now and is responsible for the success of this business, and a huge part of my success will be, are my patients happy? Are they having a good experience? And that involves a lot of things. Hopefully it involves them getting better, of course. That is the table stakes. Me making a proper diagnosis and being able to recommend some things, that's assumed. That's not what's going in the Google review. Like, he diagnosed my eczema. It is incredible. But it's everything else that we do that adds to that. And it's a lot of subtle things that the big hospitals, while they might get a lot more reimbursement from an insurance company, perhaps facility fees, just better negotiating power, all of that, I have been telling people that I get to play a different game. So I get to do certain things with the waiting room and with the patient experience and that sort of thing in a much more agile and hospitable way than they can as a larger company. And that if we take advantage of that and think about how the patient experience, asking a child and their parent, maybe at the beginning of the visit, what are you most nervous about today? I've never done that, but maybe I will try it next time. And it'll catch them off guard. Sure, you have to be a little vulnerable to do these things, but maybe they'll say, wow, a doctor's never asked me that before. I'm really nervous that I'm going to get a shot, or I think this thing is cancer. And it's probably a seborrheic keratosis that we would never think is cancer. But if a patient doesn't hear anything that you say until you tell them that thing isn't cancer, that's not very helpful if you wait until 15 minutes in to tell them that. That is something that I would certainly take away from what you just shared with that. I want you to play some of your, because I don't want to run out of time, play some of your greatest hits, because I know these things are going to be so helpful to other listeners who may have not heard them a few times like I have. And I certainly have some of my favorites. The Let's Talk Black Tea compresses.
That's been a big one, right? That was a wild study, came out of Germany, looking at patients with facial eczema and or contact dermatitis. So these people with red, scaly, miserable faces and necks, and they had them just make a compress out of plain old black tea, Camellia sinensis, right? So you get some Lipton tea, any brand of black tea. We don't want anything in there, though. We don't want an orange flavor. We don't want something that has bergamot, anything like that. So just plain old black tea. And you brew up a cup. They actually, in the paper, they say 10 minutes, so a long brew, and then you can pitch that or drink it, and then use the same tea bag and brew your second 10-minute steep, so it's weaker. And then I tell my patients, put that in the fridge, let it get nice and cool, and then throughout the day, you just take a soft washcloth, dunk it in, and just do a cool compress to the areas, face, neck, anywhere on the body. Even for babies, I'll sometimes even have them do that to the diaper area if it's really raw. And it has become this really nice, useful tool that's super inexpensive. It's very safe and gentle, where it cools the inflammation. It helps, I think it's a little bit astringent, so if it's oozy and open, it really helps that part heal. It probably is antibacterial to some degree too, because botanicals are complex. The plant has a lot of different components, and that has been such a lovely addition to my armamentarium. I use it all the time. And then of course we want to follow it up with, at the very least, a good moisturizer, or if I'm using a topical medication, it would be black tea compress, medicine, moisturizer to lock it in, and that can be transformative.
Nice. Have you ever, I may have asked you this, I can't remember. Have you used that, certainly in facial dermatitis, eczema, irritant, probably a great case is people go to a little too get excited with their retinoid at the beginning of an acne regimen or anti-aging regimen, whatever it might be. But have you used this on patients who are in the middle of or at the end of a fluorouracil, for instance, treatment for actinic keratoses?
I haven't, but I don't see why you couldn't. It might be really nice, especially somebody having one of those really intense robust reactions. Yeah. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Okay. I've been trying to, that's another thing, because at the sort of, I call it a little bit disparagingly, but prove me wrong if you're mad when you hear this, but I call it 5-minute dermatology. And I was just talking to someone yesterday, a medical science liaison at a company that I work with, and I didn't even have to say it to him. He said, I really like how you're talking. I've been to a dermatologist a few times, but every time it's been 5 minutes and then the doctor was out of there. And I said, there you go. That's 5-minute dermatology. And he was asking, he's picking my brain about how I treat pyoderma gangrenosum. And I framed it. I said, it's hard. If you are in a normal conventional practice, you are either not going to do a good job for that patient, or you are going to, as most doctors will, sacrifice yourself and the rest of your day and just screw your whole schedule and day to give that patient what they need. But it's just about thinking about the patient experience rather than just issuing that algorithm. Yep, you have diffuse actinic keratoses. This is what you're going to do. Here's a handout for it. Well, call us if you have any problems. This is the endpoint, etc. But anticipating the next problem that you are going to create and being more proactive about that than saying a little bit of Vaseline, maybe some 1% hydrocortisone. How can we be better than that? And cheaper, potentially as well. These integrative approaches tend to be so relatively low risk, including expense, and potentially high reward, which I love about that as well, even though we don't have as much evidence per se for them. Sometimes it's thousands of years of anecdotal evidence, but not a billion-dollar clinical trial.
I like that. There's kind of the joke where nobody's going to do a randomized double-blind controlled trial for parachutes jumping out of a plane. You just know. Sometimes you just know, right? Things that have been used for a long time.
Yeah, I love that. I hadn't heard that one. I like it. So the black tea compresses, look it up. There are good studies about that one, and a very low risk, high reward thing. And you mentioned no bergamot. Earl Grey is a common, people might think it's just black tea, but I'm pretty sure bergamot is the thing that kind of makes it Earl Grey. So be careful with that. But yeah, just plain black tea. How about I just took care of a little bit classic case, Peter. You've seen so many of them, I'm sure. The child is less than 6 months old, has had full body atopic dermatitis for months before they finally find someone who's willing to help or can help. Parents have not slept, child has not slept, just you can imagine misery. And my eyes light up when I see those, because I know I can help them, not because I'm happy they're in that condition. And I did my usual thing. I said, you're going to need, if you're willing, there's going to be some conventional pharmacology involved here at the beginning. I use a forest fire analogy. I'm not going to come in with someone who's totally on fire with whatever disease there is and start talking to them about weight loss or smoking cessation or changing their diet, right? You need to create the space, put out that fire, create the space to look around and say what causes these fires and how can we minimize the risk, the fire risk. And so in addition to the things I typically do, I said, I'm going to send you an email about a moisturizer where you can put a little vitamin B12 in it. And there's this cool guy down in Chicago who's super generous and just gives everything away and tells you how to make it at home if you want. And if you want to buy it from him already made up, that's great too. But I'm just going to give you that information and empower you. And the mom is totally the type of person who would cook it up in her kitchen. And I love those people. So this is pink magic that I'm getting at. Obviously, you know that, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about pink magic?
Yes, there have been a couple of really good studies. One of them is a true phase 3 study. So it looks like somebody was going to try to take this to like a medication phase, okay. But maybe, I don't know the history of it, but maybe it wasn't patentable or something, Who knows? So they dropped it, but the evidence was quite good that this This basically is just vitamin B12, cyanocobalamin in a moisturizer type base, and it seemed to help decrease flare-ups, decrease itch, even prevent flares in kids and adults. There's been actually a replicated study too, so we have 2 reasonably good studies. Honestly, about as good as we're going to get for something alternative. It's pretty close to mainstream. Yeah. With fairly large numbers, all this kind of stuff, vehicle controlled, like about as good as it gets. And I was hungry to try it. I'm like, somebody has to make this. And I looked around, I couldn't find anybody making it. So I worked with we have a small shop in Chicago. It's called Aroma Workshop. And they mostly do fragrances. They'll make custom perfumes for people using all these natural products. And cool. I met the owner and he said, I work with a lot of things. We can get vitamin B12. It's not a prescription. It's over the counter. And I have great moisturizer base. Why don't I try to make it for you? And sure enough, he did. And it was this beautiful, like, shocking pink color because the cobalamin's a deep crimson red. When you mix it with a lighter moisturizer base, it was pink. And one of the first patients I gave it to, she called it her pink magic. And I was like, oh, that's the perfect name. And it's really good. It's very modest for most patients. It's obviously not going to replace a topical JAK inhibitor. Don't worry. You're not going to have to get rid of that. But boy, is it nice, especially for babies. I find it very useful as more of a maintenance treatment, so they can maybe still use their corticosteroid or their JAK inhibitor or their non-steroidal prescription medicine, and then when they're better, they can switch to the Pink Magic to help prevent flare-ups. And super well tolerated. You can even make it in your home. I gave the recipe. It's quite simple. We have it made in small batches. I want to say it's around $20 or $25 for a tub to get it pre-made, so it's very not terribly expensive. Yeah, just a little more than a moisturizer because there's some work. They have to mix it and so on. But
and you, again, to your generosity, that is something you could sell for a good deal more, and people would be very grateful to have it, given what we throw, what a lot of our patients have thrown at these diseases before they come to see us. It's often a lot of money and time. So I love that you're making that available to people. The last one I want to touch on is the idea of supplementing with L-histidine. So this has been shown to and some people replace what a class 3 or 4 like your typical triamcinolone 0.1%, right? Is that, if you do that for 8 weeks or so, is that a realistic thing that some people might experience?
Honestly, yes, absolutely. In fact, even in the paper's fascinating. It's called Feeding Filaggrin. It's a wild paper, and it's using biochemical principles. The idea that one of the precursors for filaggrin, which is an important structural protein, and then of course when it breaks down, it plays a critical role in natural moisturizing factor. It basically is natural moisturizing factor in our skin that holds the water with hygroscopic amino acids. And if you put more into the system, you push that chemical reaction to the right, and that's the idea. So you take this amino acid powder, or it can be a capsule or a powder. I tend to recommend the powder because it's quite a bit, and the capsules there's filler and other things in there. So I just you can mix it into a smoothie. It tastes bitter. I've tried it even in water. It's very unpleasant in water, but if it's in a smoothie or juice, you barely taste it. And it really did show improvement on the level of something like a mid-potency corticosteroid. And I don't use it by itself, so along with the other things, it's really impressive. It can really help. And I also think it probably helps strengthen the gut barrier too. So it's one of these things that's helping a lot for very inexpensive, very safe. There's, in fact, now, we usually get it as a bulk supplement, but there's a company that has a proprietary version of it with some other additives in there to make it even better. So it's neat to see people picking it up saying, this is real. This is something where we can actually do more than what's been done before. So I really like that. I think there's a market for a good supplement, and a couple of companies are working on this.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Do you have off the top of your head the name of that, if you're willing to share, just from my edification?
Yes, I'll disclose that I'm an advisor for the company, but
I'm glad you are, and I appreciate the disclosure.
It's called Codex Labs.
Oh, yeah, great.
Some really nice stuff. Barb Palladis is the kind of genius inventor of it all. And when I met her, I was like just amazed with her. I'm like, okay, how can I work with you in some way? You're amazing.
Beautiful.
And genius, yes.
Yes. Barbara Palladis, I had her scheduled at one point, and it got waylaid, but I am going to feature her on the show at some point. Amazing scientist and formulator, and this Codex Labs, I talk to my
and a
patients about all
polyglot.
the time.
She speaks, I don't know how many, at least 6
It's
languages
incredible.
fluently, like native speaker. I've heard her switch gears and talking to. I'm just blown away. Sometimes I feel like I barely speak English, so it's amazing to hear somebody really fluent across multiple languages.
That is fascinating. I love that. So I'm really glad it's Codex. And again, thank you for disclosing. And I think I love that you're involved with these companies and helping let patients get access to these. Some people like to cook it up at home. Some people want something with a great label, great marketing, great feel, a great website, all of that. And we have all those needs we need to meet. And I actually I did a giveaway for my practice recently at a event that we did at a local hockey game, and we gave away a couple of the baskets were filled with Codex Lab stuff, and I like exposing people to who might not be familiar with that.
Yeah, these smaller brands, you're right. The big brands we all know, and part of the mystique, and this is true confession time, but it's that part of the reason I like the smaller brands, not only is it because maybe they're doing stuff at the cutting edge, they're doing something a little bit differently, but also because it's new to the patient. Sometimes if you just say to the patient, oh, I don't care, pick any moisturizer like the ones you're using. Really? I paid to see you. I waited 3 months to see you, and you're telling me to use the thing that I got at the drugstore? Yeah. So it's nice to have something that has some cachet that's a little bit different. Obviously, it has to be good. I don't want just a rebranded thing. So I love that not only is it a little bit off the beaten track, but they often offer something unique, a twist that maybe a mainstream brand wouldn't be willing to take the risk on because it's maybe unproven or a little bit cutting edge or maybe a little more expensive. That's the other thing. You can buy smaller brands. It is a little pricier, ideally not out of reach for people, and that's part of the calculation. But I like the ability to at least say, listen, this is the cool part about the market. We can find something that might suit you a little bit better, because you wouldn't be here if the mainstream thing helped you. If it was just the thing that you picked up at the drugstore, then you're fine, you're great. That's most people. But you're here because that wasn't enough for you.
The Codex one that you mentioned with the L-histidine, did you say that they are currently working, it's March 19th, 2025 when we're recording this, currently working on it, or it's already available?
It is available. I think the current question now is to fine tune it a little bit and ideally to bring the price down. That's my request for Barb. Gotcha. She knows, because I really want this to, I love the product, and I want everyone to be able to be on it. Sure. And it's a little bit pricier than I think some of the patients can comfortably afford. And I want to see if we can get the price down so I can basically make it part of my routine, because I basically give everybody a vitamin D supplement, everybody a probiotic, and I really try to pick ones that are accessible and inexpensive, because you could spend a fortune on a probiotic. Some of my patients say, oh, we spend $200 a month and it's refrigerated and all this, and I'm like, oh, that's great. I don't know if it's better though. If I can find something that is way cheaper, that's mass market, that I know is going to still be as effective, I'm going to go with that time again. We're not trying to sell anybody. The only thing I'm trying to sell is getting you better. And part of that sale is you have to be able to afford the darn thing. So if you can't get the medicine or can't use it routinely, and this happens to me I love phototherapy. I love phototherapy so much, but so many patients are like, even though it's covered by insurance, the copay is too much. And I do a lot of home units. I try to get them home, but I have some patients where I have a high deductible. I have a $3,000 deductible, and I just can't do that right now. We just don't have the cash. It's a lot of money. And patients, if they're able to do it, that's great. But a lot of people, I think, especially these days, everything's really expensive. So all these things are important things to consider.
Certainly, and get the idea of just giving people also different price points too, because a gentleman I learned a ton from in the medical aesthetics space. His name is John Rodriguez. He's one of the co-owners of Ethos Med Spa. You might know it. He has one in Chicago, I think.
Yes, I've heard of it. Yeah.
John is incredible. You would love talking to him. He's an incredibly generous teacher and a great genius marketer. And I do not think marketing is a bad word. I think marketing is an incredibly good word for doctors to learn about. Marketing and sales. We are selling things to patients every day to help get them better, regardless of whether it has any financial benefit from us beyond the insurance claim or whatever they paid for the consultation. So knowing about those things is important, but these are just so critical to know about. And he taught me, don't shop with someone else's wallet. Don't make an assumption about. I have patients who are on Medicaid. I don't not tell them about certain things because I assume they can't pay for it. I've had one the other day who told me all of the different supplements that they were taking, and that really added up. And I told her about some that I like. So don't assume. That's discrimination. Essentially, if you're not going to teach someone about something or offer it to them. So
I agree.
The idea of different price points, and the little company thing. What I also like about the smaller companies is access. The best example for me from LearnSkin and IDCP was learning about neogenesis out in San Diego. And that I have no conflict of interest to disclose about them, other than I love every part of what they do and what they build and their team. And they have been very kind to me. And hopefully by the time some of folks are listening to this, maybe at least one episode will have aired with their brand ambassador, Christine Preston, or head of, I think, product development, perhaps, or I may be getting that wrong. But anyway, she's so generous. She's a licensed skin therapist, which I love the title, up in Ontario, and I love Canada in general. I just think they're wonderful people and wonderful place. And she is on, her episode will be out by the time this airs. And she teaches us how to incorporate neogenesis products into a patient who's struggling with acne, for instance, and how to reset the skin. A lot of people aren't ready for our medications yet. Their skin that has been through the ringer, and it needs to be reset and restored before you can throw a retinoid at it, before you can throw clindamycin and benzoyl peroxide and all these things at it, or before they're ready for isotretinoin. And to think about those things and know about the products does really reflect on us. It's how we differentiate ourselves as private independent practices and how we thrive in an environment that is set up against us, essentially to make us fail to some degree. So I'm grateful to them. Every time I've reached out to them, the CEO, Steve, is on with me, Greg, the science guy, they're so generous. Katie, who helps with everything that I need. I don't have that with Neutrogena. And that's just the name of a big company. I love Neutrogena, but I can't get on the horn with them. And they're unique products too. So I'm grateful that LearnSkin exposed me to them and a lot of other like Codex as well. I've thrown some greatest hits at you, but maybe there are some that you picked up recently or don't talk about as often or just are interesting you recently that you've tried. Anything off the top of your head that you're liking for whether it's eczema or any other disease?
To me, the most exciting thing right now is berberine.
Okay,
There's a lot of buzz around this because a paper from Ian Miles' group. Ian Miles is an allergist at the National Institutes for Health. He's an interesting guy, a really avant-garde thinker, and he published a pretty powerful paper on topical steroid withdrawal. And in that, he actually had a subpopulation of patients that he gave berberine because, in theory, it can affect this mitochondrial energy chain that actually they hypothesized in the paper is part of the problem with TSW. And berberine addresses that. It turns out so does metformin. But I prefer not to write metformin. As a dermatologist, it makes me a little bit nervous, just a tiny bit. So I love the fact that we can recommend berberine as an OTC, and it actually did very well in the paper. And I have a number of patients trying it now. It's fascinating. Of course, some people talk about berberine as being like a GLP-1 agonist, like similar to that too. It can have an effect on insulin. It can have an effect on weight loss. It can help weight loss. So it's a fascinating molecule, and I'm interested in both orally, which is how I'm recommending it right now, but I'm also fascinated in topically. Is there a role for this? And then the other thing that's been fascinating is I guess it's a rediscovery in a way of using omega acids supplements for people. And this is something that kind of has not been in favor for a while, but is used in canine atopic dermatitis. So I'm working with a group. We're talking about putting together a guideline document for canine atopic derm. Dogs get bad eczema too. This is part of what they do. So I wrote a recent paper where we did a big review of this. And I think there is compelling evidence to supplement people with oral omega fatty acids or oral ceramides. There's actually one paper that suggests giving people oral ceramides might help. So again, there's some room here, and I'm going to pick Barb's brain from Codex. Is there a way we can do this? Is there a palatable way to do this? Because I think there's something to it. And again, your mileage may vary, but this is what I'm thinking about right now and playing with, and I've had some interesting feedback and some success.
Nice. And again, the common theme here is how accessible these things are. We're not doing prior authorizations for berberine and L-histidine and black tea. And
the one I recommend is Costco, and I will disclose I'm a proud Costco member. So that's
there you go.
Costco. But they have it at Costco, and it's great. So it's really inexpensive, and I'm personally taking it too. I was like, I better take this. Diabetes runs in my family. I want to try it.
Nice. I think I remember. Is Solaray a brand that you ever have experience with? Yes. Or I think that's the one that was recommended when we were talking about berberine.
And they call all that out right in that paper from Dr. Ian Miles. They actually called, because I guess they looked at purity and the good manufacturing practices. So that Solar Ray got called out. Again, I have no connection to Solar Ray, but yes, that was one of the brands. So that's one I recommend.
But called out as a good one.
As a good one,
Okay,
yes. They actually,
nice.
which is really, it's a very strange paper. I couldn't believe how much it came out in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology, which is a big journal. I'm a little shocked at how much got through, but fascinating.
Amazing.
They really went. It's very practical for a JID paper.
I love this. This is a good way to put a bow on the show. I'm really glad you just brought that up. The last thing that I will say is, I think you mentioned the omegas. Another way I think about the patient experience and how my practice is called Above and Beyond Dermatology. It's not just a name. Every day I'm thinking, how can I go above and beyond what the 5-minute dermatologists are doing? And that I also think about the silly but wonderful movie Crazy Stupid Love with Steve Carell and Ryan Gosling and Kevin Bacon. Lots of good fun people are in it. And they, in the makeover scene, he tells Steve Carell's character, be better than the gap. And that I always remind, my wife tells me that sometimes, and I always try to remind myself to how can we be better than the gap in terms of when we're recommending a moisturizer. Put someone on isotretinoin, they're going to go through some stuff. And we know that. We can anticipate that and prepare them, and they're going to say, oh my God, like my doctor told me this was going to happen. And then they told me I could use this to make it better, or I could use this to make it not even happen potentially. And so omegas play a role in that too. And why not L-histidine? I never thought about it until now, but an isotretinoin patient who doesn't have atopic dermatitis might benefit from L-histidine supplementation while they're taking it. I don't do this without further research, but I don't know if there's interactions or anything like that. But why not just think like that and then do some more research? Try it on a patient if it seems safe. So I just love all of that, all of those opportunities there. But what I want to bring back around to put a bow on this is when you taught me just now about berberine and Ian Miles and topical steroid withdrawal, you mentioned at the top of the show, and one of my favorite experiences with you so far, and there are many, you gave a lecture during IDCP this year that was all about UFOs. And it was so funny. It was amazing. I was enthralled, and the entire time I was just saying to myself, I'm so happy I'm here. I know there are other people who are like, does he know that he's in IDCP? What's going on? Because you didn't really preface it. You just went. You're just like, we changed a thing, and we're going to talk about this thing next week. So today I'm going to talk about UFOs. And I thought that was so awesome, so vulnerable, so brave. And you leaned into your passion about that and your interest in the fringe. And sometimes fringe things are fringe for a reason, and they stay fringe, and then gradually they melt away. Some things are fringe because they are really outside the box ideas, and all of those are always poo-pooed to some degree at the beginning. And you mentioned Ian Miles. I didn't know much about him. The first thing that came up on Google when I put in a certain search was a press release from the National Institutes of Health from 5 days ago, March 14th, 2025. The headline is Topical Steroid Withdrawal Diagnostic Criteria Defined by NIH Researchers. And if you would have told the TSW people that 10 years ago, they would say, you're not talking to the people I'm talking to. I get a lot of flack every time I say, but go on Reddit and listen to the people once in a while. And not everything they say is true, but the idea of listening and holding the space that maybe there is something to that. And I'll let you respond in a second, but the first paragraph says, researchers at the NIH have determined that dermatitis resulting from topical steroid withdrawal is distinct from eczema and is caused by an excess of an essential chemical compound in the body. Scientists from NIH's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases identified treatments that could be studied in clinical trials for the condition based on their potential to lower levels of the chemical compound called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD+, and we all know that everybody is talking about NAD right now, a form of vitamin B3. The findings were published in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology, and they talk about Ian Miles certainly in there. And that is just, I think, a perfect way of ending or closing. And I want to send it to you a show with Dr. Leo. That TSW was fringe as hell. Like, you can't find nothing more fringe until now.
It brings us full circle. And I just was going to say, too, that I think your patients are really lucky because you could tell you care, you're interested in learning. And it makes me think of the quote from Peabody, who said, one of the essential qualities of the clinician is interest in humanity. For the secret of the care of the patient is in caring for the patient. And you can't fake it, right? And the people who really care, those are the people that really are going to do something different. They're going to go above and beyond. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you for the kind words, of course, and thank you for being here. What's old is new again, truly. And whether it's 1,000-year-old treatment that we're trying to apply to our patients, or just the idea of a doctor walking into someone's home with a black bag and putting a hand on them and trying to provide some comfort in a way. I do house calls, partly because of that, partly because it makes me feel like an old country doctor. And I'm thinking about getting one of those black bags, those leather ones. But I just love the idea of just having some interest. Thanks for sharing that quote, and it truly did that made it a full circle for me in talking to you. So I want to thank you again for being on the show. People will want to hear from you again. Undoubtedly, you're a busy man, but I will be reaching out down the road to do maybe a deep dive on you provide an integrative framework you try to share with us about approach to eczema, that practical toolbox. And as that evolves, maybe we can deep dive on that sometime, spend a whole episode just talking about patient comes in, teach us masterclass on how to help in general, bring it all together for a patient struggling with eczema. So I'll let you tell us anywhere where people can reach you. If a patient wants to talk to you, anything like that, this will be in the show notes as well, but I want you to be able to tell us a little bit as well.
Sure. You can follow me at the Chicago Eczema Center website. It's chicagoeczema.com. That's the best place to kind of follow us. We're also on Facebook there as well. And then our office is Medical Dermatology Associates of Chicago. We're in the River North neighborhood, and you can check us out. We're dermchicago.com.
Beautiful. And your river is green, right? Is it still green?
Yeah, it's probably less green today.
Less
but
green
yes,
today?
It's
Okay.
often it's even a baseline a little bit green.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But 2 days ago was St. Patrick's Day, and
yes.
It's quite a day in Chicago. So thank you, Leo, for being here. Check him out at the Chicago Integrative Eczema Center and LearnSkin as well. Anyone who's interested in reigniting their passion for dermatology, if you're feeling that itch and feeling like there's something missing, give it a shot. Go check out LearnSkin. This is where this truly invigorates a lot of people. I've seen them have that fire reignited and that passion and interest again. This stuff gets beaten out of us because of the system. It's not a doctor problem. It's a system problem, and we can proactively address that. So thank you again for being here. This was super fun. Take care, Peter. This has been another episode of Above and Beyond Dermatology. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Lewellis. I will see you again next time. Thank you very much.
Hey, Stephen here. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way you can support a podcast is to share, follow, subscribe, and most importantly, leave an honest review on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast hosting platform. If you're new here, you might not feel ready to leave an honest review yet. That's totally fine. At the very least, keep listening and share it with one person in your life who you think might benefit from it. Thanks for being here. Your attention means the world to me. I'll see you on the next episode. If you like this and want to subscribe to my newsletter, head over to lewellismd.com. That's LEWELLISMD as in medical doctor.com.